Incentives versus goals. Incentives matter because most people will usually do more for their own benefit than for the benefit of others. Incentives link the two concerns together. A waitress brings food to your table not because of your hunger, but because her salary and tips depend on it. In the absence of such incentives, service in restaurants in the Soviet Union was notoriously bad. Unsold goods piling up in warehouses were not the only consequence of a lack of incentives that come with a free market price system. Prices not only help determine which particular things are produced, they are also one of the ways of rationing the inherent scarcity of all goods and services, as well as rationing the scarce resources that go into producing those goods and services. However, prices do not create that scarcity, which will require some form of rationing under any other economic system. Simple as all this may seem, it goes counter to many policies and programs designed to make various goods and services affordable, or to keep them from becoming prohibitively expensive. But being prohibitive is precisely how prices limit how much each person uses. If everything were made affordable by government decree, there would still not be any more to go around than when things were prohibitively expensive. There would simply have to be some alternative method of rationing the inherent scarcity. Whether that method was through the government's issuing ration coupons, the emergence of black markets, or just fighting over things when they go on sale, the rationing would still have to be done, since artificially making things affordable does not create any more total output. On the contrary, price ceilings tend to cause less output to be produced. Many apparently humanitarian policies have backfired throughout history because of a failure to understand the role of prices. Attempts to keep food prices down by imposing price controls have led to hunger and even starvation, whether in 17th century Italy, 18th century India, France after the French Revolution, Russia after the Bolshevik Revolution, or in a number of African countries after they obtained independence during the 1960s. Some of these African countries, like some of the countries in Eastern Europe, once had such an abundance of food that they were food exporters before the era of price control and government planning turned them into countries unable to feed themselves. Failure to supply goods as a result of government restrictions must be sharply distinguished from an inability to produce them. Food can be in short supply in a country with extremely fertile soil, as in post-communist Russia that had not yet achieved a free market economy. Quote, undulating gently through pastoral hills 150 miles south of Moscow, the Plava River Valley is a farmer's dream come true. This is the gateway to what Russians call Chernozem, Black Earth country, which boasts some of the most fertile soil in Europe, within 3 hours' drive of a giant hungry metropolis. Black Earth country has the natural wealth to feed an entire nation, but it can barely feed itself. End quote. It is hard even to imagine in a free market economy a hungry city dependent on imports of foreign food, when there is extraordinarily fertile farmland not far away. Yet the people on that very fertile farmland were as poor as the city dwellers were hungry. The workers harvesting that land earned the equivalent of about $10 a week, with even this small amount being paid in kind, sacks of potatoes or cucumbers, because of a lack of money. As the mayor of a town in this region said, "We ought to be rich. We have wonderful soil. We have the scientific know-how. We have qualified people. But what does it add up to?" If nothing else, it adds up to a reason for understanding economics as a means of achieving an efficient allocation of scarce resources which have alternative uses. All that was lacking in Russia was a market to connect the hungry city with the products of the fertile land, and a government that would allow such a market to function freely. But in some places, local Russian officials forbade the movement of food across local boundary lines in order to assure low food prices within their own jurisdictions, and therefore local political support for themselves. Again, it is necessary to emphasize that this was not a stupid policy from the standpoint of officials trying to gain local popularity with consumers by maintaining low food prices. This protected their political careers, however disastrous such policies were for the country as a whole. While systemic causation in a free market is, in one sense, impersonal, in the sense that its outcomes are not specifically predetermined by any given person, the market is ultimately a way by which many people's individual personal desires are reconciled with those of other people. Too often, a false contrast is made between the impersonal marketplace and the supposedly compassionate policies of various government programs. But both systems face the same scarcity of resources, and both systems make choices within the constraints of that scarcity. The difference is that one system involves each individual making choices for himself or herself, while the other system involves a small number of people making choices for millions of others. The mechanisms of the market are impersonal, but the choices made by individuals are as personal as choices made anywhere else. It may be fashionable for journalists to refer to the whim of the marketplace, as if that were something different from the desires of people, just as it was once fashionable to advocate production for use rather than profit, as if profits could be made by producing things that people cannot use or do not want to use. The real contrast is between choices made by individuals for themselves and choices made for them by others who presume to define what these individuals really need.